Welcome back to episode 4. It's week 4 of Bloops and Barrels. Ethan, how are we doing this week? We're recording this Monday night. We recorded last week's episode also late on a Monday night, so I feel like we're getting a little bit into a rhythm. But 10:38 Central Time. We already talked some softball.
Yeah, we're feeling great. Always ready to talk softball is the answer there.
So a huge weekend in softball last weekend. So much going on as we kind of get through this non-conference slate. So many individual tournaments, so many games for all these teams. So as we head into Big Ten play, which starts this weekend, going to start things off with a little bit of a power rankings reset. And we'll start at the top. Back in episode 1, you can go back there if you'd like. We talked about 3 teams, UCLA, Nebraska, and Oregon in that first tier. Right now, we only have 2 teams in that tier with UCLA and Nebraska. Ethan, who's got the advantage here? I'm personally thinking that UCLA right now is the team that probably is the hotter team, the team that people are more talking about. They hit home runs for days. But Nebraska with its pitching, I think long term, Nebraska might be the team.
I think I agree that I think UCLA is the better team, but if we're talking about who might finish ahead in the Big Ten regular season standings, maybe it's Nebraska, especially because when those two teams face off in late March, that series will be in Lincoln. But it really is. It's a close battle between these two teams. I maybe lean UCLA just because I think they have the singular best unit of any of these two teams. Actually, I'm curious, how would you rank UCLA offense, UCLA pitching slash defense, Nebraska offense, Nebraska pitching slash defense? I think there's like a clear answer here, but I'm curious what you have to say.
I think it's UCLA offense first, and it's
Yeah.
not even close. Then it's Nebraska's pitching, then it's
Yep.
Nebraska's offense, and then it's UCLA's pitching.
I completely agree, but I think UCLA's offense is like by so far and away the best unit that I think it makes up for the fact that UCLA's pitching has been below average so far this season. Yes, really tough competition. Meanwhile, Nebraska is a good offensive and pitching team, but I just have so much faith in this UCLA offense, which is going to break so many records by the end of this season. They're slugging 809 as a team. Also, yes, we mentioned the pitching struggles. Right now, in terms of fielding percentage, they have the best defense in the conference, and we're always just on Megan Grant watch here on this podcast, now up to 30 walks compared to 4 strikeouts.
It's unbelievable. 16 home runs as well. This is my favorite stat about this UCLA team right now. They've got 60 home runs this season. The gap between UCLA in first in the Big Ten and Washington in second is larger than Washington in second and Michigan State in last.
That is unbelievable. That's a fantastic stat.
It's unbelievable. It's a 27 home run difference between UCLA with 60 and Washington with 33, and then Michigan State is 10 in 17th place in the Big Ten. That is just how good UCLA has been. So for you, you think that power and the slugging and the Megan Grant, Jordan Woolery show is enough right now to have UCLA as the team to beat in the conference?
Yeah, because we've already seen it translate against some of the best teams in the country. Yes, Nebraska's also played some great teams and come away with victories, but you look at what UCLA did this past weekend to Florida, where if you're able to put up double-digit runs on SEC teams, you are a true national title contender. And that's not to say Nebraska isn't, but I think when these two teams face off, which is the Big Ten series of the year, I can't wait for late March for when we get to see these two teams square off. But I think that'll give UCLA the advantage. But for now, we don't have to pit these squads against each other. We just get to watch them both dominate everything in their path.
I will say in Big Ten play, I think there is more room to grow for Nebraska's offense. You talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but like Ava Kuzak, Hannah Core, Samantha Bland even all have had really slow starts. And I think in Big Ten play, when the pitching is a little bit worse than what Nebraska has faced, those bats will really heat up and just elevate the floor.
We've also now hit the point of the season where those described slow starts, we're entering the middle portion of the season. That's just then having a slow season at that point. So we're getting close to, if you're in a slump, I'm on full watch where it's time to break out of it starting now as we enter Big Ten play for some teams this weekend.
We can move on to tier 2 while we're at it. In this tier right now, we have our Big Ten contenders, and part of this tier is Oregon. Washington as well, Michigan, Penn State's moved up from tier 3 where we had them preseason, and Indiana also in this tier 2 as well, which we had them in at the beginning of the year. Does Oregon is Oregon really in this tier? Are they in tier 1? Are they in their own tier?
Yeah, I would go maybe their own tier. They're in tier 1.5, in my opinion, because I think they have a higher ceiling than the other teams in the rest of this group. But they haven't proved it yet on the softball field. That said, this last weekend was definitely a positive sign for Oregon. I think maybe Elon Butler listens to the podcast because you called her out last week saying she needs to perform better. What does she go out and do this weekend? She hit 647, a dozen runs batted in, five doubles on the weekend. Oregon, I think, is rounding into form, and I think still has just as good of a chance to be, hosting a regional down the line. But obviously, lots to go in the season. But I still feel we're preaching patience with this Oregon team, and I think everyone who held on to their Ducks stock is going to be rewarded.
I think that out of those teams in this tier two, they absolutely have the best chance to compete with UCLA and not Indiana, but Nebraska rather. Just because I think from a talent perspective, they're far beyond some of those other teams, and like they still have the best pitcher in the conference in Lindsey Grine, who has been outstanding so far this year. A 1.94 ERA, 0.81 WHIP. She's pitched almost 40 innings at this point, 54 strikeouts. And we talked about Sokolsky last week. Can they get a second pitching? Some backup there, which they had the opportunity. I mean, all of their pitchers so far this season sub 4 ERA. But out of the other teams in that group, Ethan, does anybody else catch your eye as somebody that can compete with UCLA and Nebraska?
I'm going to be totally honest. All of these teams catch my eye. I think this is a really good group of teams that I guess we've called 3 through 7. But my sneaky take is that all of these teams can totally be competitive with the top dogs. I would have felt a little bit better about Michigan had they not had a brutal collapse against Virginia. They were up 4-1 in the seventh inning, ended up losing that game by one. But Indiana with their offense, Penn State with their pitching. But the team that I'm going to choose to truly answer your question, I think it's Washington because we've seen them do it already. They beat Nebraska back on February 8th, 3-2, and that wasn't it's an off day. The Cornhuskers are throwing someone different, and even if they were, it's not like Jensen hasn't been phenomenal for the Huskers. That was a game that Jordy Frahm started, had 10 strikeouts in, and Washington still emerged victorious. And the Huskies, yes, this past weekend didn't play anyone particularly of note, but a 53-7 score over the course of 5 games. And there are currently 3 teams in the conference that are top 5 in both runs scored and ERA. Doesn't include either UCLA or Nebraska. It's actually 3 teams from this grouping. It's Washington, Penn State, and Indiana. And between those three, I would say Washington has faced by far the toughest schedule.
And it just shows that out of these teams, I mean, you're saying anybody can compete with those top dogs. They've got the tools there. I think that Washington Northwestern series this weekend is going to be incredibly interesting. Speaking of Northwestern, falling to tier 3 in our power rankings alongside Ohio State, both those teams have really struggled so far. I was actually moved up from tier 4 there. They sit at 13-6. Then the other 3 teams that we have in this tier 3, Purdue at 13-6, Wisconsin at 13-6, and Michigan State at 10-9. Let's talk about the Cats and Buckeyes, though. Combined 14 wins, 22 losses between them. They faced off against each other this past weekend. Northwestern won 11-1, huge win over Ohio State. What are the expectations, though, for these two teams after really slow starts?
This is just a really weird group of 6 teams. I'm struggling to get a read on most of them. For those 2 teams, yes, they've probably been the 2 most disappointing teams in the conference 4 weeks into the season. But I think internally, based on preseason expectations, based on the amount of talent on the rosters, within the expectation should be we can still be above 500 in Big Ten play. The reality, especially for Ohio State, I don't think will reflect that, even though Ohio State does. I'm going to mark them right now as a potential team to watch because early in conference play, they get a pretty manageable schedule. They start out with Iowa, Purdue, Michigan State, Minnesota, and then things really ramp up in the last 4 weekends. Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, Washington is a brutal, brutal stretch of weekends. So Ohio State needs to collect wins. They need to get hot fast in Big Ten play. And then I don't know. There's something about you reading this tier of teams. Northwestern feels better than all of the teams in the tier, with maybe the exception of Purdue. Northwestern's played some really tough teams, and I don't know. I feel like this tier maybe should be split into 2 teams. A few weeks from now, I think there's an argument that Purdue and Northwestern will start to separate them out towards the top of this tier, but really just all of these teams have been remarkably inconsistent. I think the Wisconsin, which maybe with a good weekend could have moved into tier 2, but really struggled this past weekend. Michigan State's been up and down. Iowa is, to me, maybe the biggest unknown. Prove it. I'll believe it when I see a team in the conference. So This is a weird tier three. I don't know what you make of these teams. I'm curious within this tier how you would rank them.
I mean, I think Purdue is probably the team that I feel most confident with in this tier, and then probably Northwestern after, just based on talent. I think the Wildcats have too much talent on this roster for them not to figure things out in Big Ten play. I think, for the Wildcats, I mean, we've seen some really dominant Big Ten regular seasons. Like, that's not going to be this year. I think that they finish above 500 in Big Ten play, maybe a 14 win, 15 win Big Ten regular season for Northwestern. That I don't anything more than that feels like pushing it. But we've seen the pitching really show up at times. Like Marina Mason
Is
is
awesome.
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 She's been awesome. She did struggle a little bit against Duke this past weekend, but had a 8 strikeout, 1 earned run game against Ohio State and a complete game. You saw Riley Grudzelanek put in some innings, 6 strikeouts in 7 innings versus Boston University. But I'm just still waiting for Northwestern to understand that it has the talent on the roster to win big games. That hasn't quite happened yet. Kansas Robinson showed up this weekend. She's alive. Kaylee Avasado back in a slump. You can't ever get both of them, on the right foot. I mean, the fact that Avasado is batting under 300 this deep into the season, 56 at bats, she's at 286. She's a way better hitter than that. I don't know. There's just like something's not clicking with this Northwestern team.
Yeah, I totally. Kelsey Nader, in terms of the offense, Kelsey Nader and MRA are really the only two players who I think are meeting or surpassing expectations. Some of the freshmen have been good in limited sample sizes, but yeah, the offense, we thought the offense would be just plug and play, good to go, and the pitching were the concerns. And I think there still have been some concerns in the circle, even though we mentioned Marina Mason's been really good. Just puzzling inconsistency. It's been the trend, but also I think you probably could have said the same last year about the non-conference slate for the Wildcats. They were able to pick up a few more wins. I think back to that Mississippi State series where they lose the series overall, but they did pick up a big ranked win, which really helped them down the line when it came time for seeding and postseason selection. Northwestern doesn't really have that so far this year, but then again, Northwestern was able to turn things around and have a really good Big Ten regular season last year when the momentum wasn't there. So I'm not ruling that out this year. I'm curious where you stand on Ohio State. Is there anything salvageable, or is this just fully not the same team as 2025?
Until the pitching finds something, this team is not salvageable. This team will not finish above 500 in Big Ten play. And I don't care about how good the offense is. I mean, this is an offense that is eighth in the country in home runs per game, top 20 in slugging. But when your team pitching is above 6 for an ERA, it's just not, especially in the Big Ten where it's such an offensive minded conference. You talk about all these teams, it's UCLA at the top or Indiana or Michigan. Like there's too much offense in the conference for you not to have pitching. So I think for Ohio State, they've got to figure that out. I mean, only 3 pitchers have played this entire season, and none of them have an ERA below 4.77. That's the best one, Jenna Molk. So lot to figure out in Columbus. Moving to the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten, 4 teams that haven't quite gotten out of the basement of our power rankings: Maryland, Rutgers, Minnesota, and Illinois. But Ethan, I know you've been wanting to talk about Minnesota all season long, and you found a player that makes people want to watch this team.
Yeah, well, I think with these teams, it's about finding things that are exciting. And yeah, you mentioned Minnesota, probably the team we've talked the least about on this podcast so far through a month. And Taro Wallako is making them totally watchable. The sophomore's been really good, played just 9 games as a freshman, 6 total at bats. And this year, she's been great. It wasn't the best weekend for her this past weekend, but here's a stat for you. There are currently 119 qualified players on the Big Ten average leaderboard, and Taro Wallako is last in strikeouts. She's had just 1 all year. It came in the first game this past weekend against Grand Canyon, a really good Grand Canyon team, by the way. So that's 15 games without a strikeout, and she also leads the Gophers with 6 home runs, 16 RBIs, and she's really kind of been the only source of offense for the Gophers. But she's been undoubtedly awesome, and that internal development from year 1 to year 2 is just really exciting to see happening in the Twin Cities.
I love Anna McGowan for Maryland. I mean, what
I
she's
thought you were
done.
going to talk about Kira Booker, who has continued to be one of the cooler players in the conference.
Yes, but famously, I'm not a fan of pitching. I'm not a fan of talking about pitching on this podcast.
Yeah.
The Big Ten is not a pitching conference. They've got some great pitchers. I've given Lindsey Grine her flowers. I've given some flowers to Marina Mason. We've talked to Taylor Tinsley a whole lot so far on the podcast through 4 weeks. But I'm all about offense at heart. And McGowan for Maryland, team leader in home runs and RBIs after this past weekend. She hit home run in every game, 4 consecutive games with a home run, went 385 with the average, 529 with the on base percentage, 4 homers, 11 ribbies, walked a good amount, had 3 walks in her 17 plate appearances. Talk about offense. Like Maryland's not a team that I think has a ton, but if McGowan can, keep it going, like really fun player to watch, maybe a sneaky all Big Ten recognition deep in the season. I'm getting ahead of myself potentially. But hey, that's hot. That's hot.
I think Maryland, if we did a watchability index, would rank higher than they do in the power rankings.
100%, because I think they have a couple really fun players.
Totally.
Okay. Really, though, what we're excited about is that we have Big Ten matchups this
It's
week.
here.
We've got 5 of them across the conference. There's still some teams that will pick things up, start a Big Ten play later on in the month of March. But the first one we have, the Minnesota at Indiana. We've got Rutgers and Maryland squaring off. Northwestern at Washington, a really interesting battle between the 2 purple schools in the Big Ten. And then 2 matchups that we're really excited about, Wisconsin at UCLA. And how about Iowa and Ohio State?
Yeah, well, both of those teams were in our tier 3 of this conversation, and I just think we're going to get some answers this weekend. I mentioned we've talked about Ohio State's struggles all season long. If they lose this series to Iowa, I am officially ready to say the ship has sailed. It's just not going to materialize this year for the Buckeyes. And for Iowa, they're sitting at 13-6, 13 wins, and of them, maybe 1 good win against Western Kentucky. They have had a very fake winning schedule so far this season. To be completely frank, it hasn't been the most impressive 13-6 in the world. And yes, it was promising that last weekend they were able to keep it relatively close against a ranked LSU team, but this team has just yet to beat anyone good. And I want to decide what both of these teams are. And if Iowa wins, yeah, like I said, I'll be done with Ohio State. If Ohio State wins, it'll mostly confirm a lot of my suspicions about Iowa. And I'm just ready to get some of these questions answered about both these teams.
I'm super excited about Wisconsin at UCLA. And I think for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think this is a relatively safe test for UCLA at the beginning of its Big Ten season. And the reason because of that is because Wisconsin has some really good offensive bats. Like this is a team that can really hit. They've got 7 players in their regular starting lineup batting above 300. 5 of those players are batting above 390. Not to mention they're 22nd in the country in average. I mean, they've got players that get on base, cause problems. And for UCLA, which is a pitching staff that we've talked about, has really struggled so far this season, how does the pitching staff handle an entire weekend against a really quality offense? That's number one. Number two, I have to bring her up every single week in some fashion, but Megan Grant has just been so fun to watch. She hit 26 home runs last season, which was a Big Ten record in 67 games, right? She already has 16 homers in 21 games. We talked about the on-base percentage with the walks. It's above 700. Just any opportunity to watch her, sign me up. She's essentially just become the Barry Bonds of softball, is what's happened.
I think you would have chosen whatever series UCLA was playing in as your series to watch if they were playing a nunnery from the middle of nowhere. I think you would have picked them against middle schoolers. I think you would have picked them against the local YMCA. I think you were locked into picking the Bruins no matter what.
You forgot the local Boys and Girls Club as well.
Totally.
But for Wisconsin, in all seriousness, I mean, this was a team that had a disappointing weekend last weekend, but if you can pick up a win here against UCLA and then maybe scrape together some wins against Penn State, Nebraska, Michigan later in the schedule, there's a legit conversation to find a path to a tournament berth. It starts, though, with stealing games against the best teams in the conference, and you have a huge opportunity to do that against UCLA.
I think it's important to remind everyone that there are 8 weekends of Big Ten play. So that means you're playing only 8 of the other 16 teams in the conference. So there does not necessarily mean that all of these teams are playing a similar strength of schedule. Some teams got a lucky draw. I think about Penn State. Some teams got really brutal draws, and it is going to impact what those regular season standings are. As much as 8 weekends you can get a good idea of the team, it is not a complete sample.
So this past weekend, there was a lot going on in the world of Big Ten sports, including Big Ten basketball. I went to the Northwestern versus Oregon game this past weekend, and we know
Northwestern game winner.
Yeah, Northwestern game winner Nick Martinelli. Nick Martinelli had to get on the podcast somehow. I've got his bobblehead here. Do you think Nick Martinelli would be good at soft? Do you think he would be a good softball player? What do you think he does behind softball?
Nick Martinelli has unbelievable touch, so I lean yes.
Would he be a bloops guy or a barrels guy?
He'd be a bloops guy. The flips, the bloops, come on, totally.
Oh, easy money. Anyway, for my favorite thing I saw in the Big Ten this week, in the world of softball. It was at the Northwestern basketball game because, if you get onto the second floor of Walsh Ryan Arena or the third floor of Walsh Ryan Arena, you can see the progress that Northwestern has had on the J. And it's awesome. The dugouts are in, the grass is in, they're still working on the infield, but the press box looks lovely. There's still a lot of work to do. They won't be playing there this year. They'll be playing there next year. But just seeing that and the progress that they've made was super exciting, even in a season where overall Northwestern hasn't been the most exciting follow.
For me, the real best thing I saw in the Big Ten this week was just two awesome games between Nebraska and Oklahoma State, and we were absolutely just robbed of a third series deciding game as a result of weather. That tends to happen early in these seasons, but it's a huge bummer. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I kind of want to spark a debate here, McKenna Young threw the 16th no-hitter in Penn State history this weekend. She was phenomenal, faced the minimum 15 batters. But I'm kind of curious, do you think 5-inning no-hitters should count in the record book if it ends in a run roll? I like something about it feels like not complete to me. I don't know.
Maybe because it's not a complete game, but it is a complete game. I don't know.
It is.
It's weird. It's weird. I think there should be an asterisk next to it, but just because your offense is really good doesn't mean that you should be like something.
I don't think you should be penalized for it, but I do think we need a way to discern a full set.
So
there are also like complete game no hitters that in extra innings like that. We've seen some crazy performances in the history of this conference and the history of college softball, and I'm not sure this lands quite on the same tier as an amazing of an accomplishment this is for McKenna Young and Penn State, who just continue to have.
It's like it's still Penn State. It's still Penn State. That's my team. That's my team.
I know. I'm not trying to take anything away from Penn State, and you as the anti-pitching guy, I feel like I have an onus to defend them. They're the best pitching team in the conference.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. I'll have to get back to you for next week.
All right, next week, let me know what you think when you sleep on it.
Of course. As always, please remember to like and subscribe, comment anything that you'd like to see on the podcast in the upcoming weeks. You can follow us on X at Bloops Barrels and on Instagram at Bloops and Barrels. You have to spell it out because once again, Instagram does not like the @ sign. See you next week.